Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Tolkien Road, episode 333. Greta,
Ooh.
it's Easter Friday, and Jesus is alive. And so are you.
Ah!
Because everybody's probably been wondering if you're alive or not, because you haven't been on the show in a while. See what I did there?
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
That's clever. That's really clever.
Yeah.
No, it's been a minute. I've missed it for sure. Hopefully I'm not too rusty.
Yeah. A couple weeks ago, Greta was just like, out of the blue, she's like, how's the podcast going? So, yeah, we just entered this season of our lives where things are, things are really busy for both of us, and lots going on, career-wise and all these sorts of things, and it's just sometimes it's hard, to find the right time to align for both of us, and I haven't yet put Greta up to the task of doing a solo episode by herself.
Thank God.
maybe one of these days. Hey, you know what? We'll make that a Patreon goal. If we can raise $10,000 in a month, then Greta will do a solo episode all by herself.
10,000?
Yeah,
that's kind of high.
I'm just saying, why not put it out there? Do you want to do it for less?
Well, that's what I was wondering. I'm like, I'm kind of intrigued. I'm not sure we'll get to 10,000.
That was like kind of a ludicrous goal to put that. I might as well have said like a bajillion dollars.
A bajillion dollars,
but,
yeah.
But I'll tell you what, if we raise $5,000 in 1 month via Patreon, then I'll have Greta do a solo episode. That's a very high bar. That probably won't happen. But if you guys really want it, then make it happen. So, anyway.
And it will happen. I promise.
Oh.
I promise.
Wait, are you going to donate $5,000?
No. What I meant was, if we reach that goal,
yes,
I will do a solo episode.
Yeah.
I'm bought in. That's what I'm saying.
I ain't going to argue with that.
I'll do it.
All right.
I'll do it. I'm not promising what you guys are going to end up with, but
hey,
I will do it.
It's Easter, the season of miracles, so who knows?
Amen.
That's right.
Yes.
In this Easter special edition, we'll consider one of my favorite passages from The Lord of the Rings, Sam's astonishment at awakening, and what did I write there? Sam's astonishment awakening in Ithilien after the destruction of the One Ring, and how it relates to Tolkien's own Christian faith. So really think about this one as Easter joy and the Field of Cormallen. Before we get started, we'd like to give a double up air five to our amazing fellowship. Hands up. 3, 2, 1. Whoosh. Nice.
That was good.
Special thanks to this episode's executive producers, J.R.R, Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien, Jacob Lockham, John H., and Melkor27. And a shout out to our newest patron, Terry S. Thank you, Terry.
Oh, yeah. Thanks,
really
Terry.
Appreciate your joining our fellowship.
Yeah.
Also, a shout out to those celebrating their fellowship anniversary in April of 2023, Jonathan D., Julia, KDP, Rebecca R., and Ty M. Thank you all so much for sticking with us over the last year, and in some cases, many years.
Yeah.
Truly appreciate you.
Yeah, we really do.
All right. So, I'm going to make these notes a little bigger so I'm not straining my eyeballs. All right. Hey, join the Fellowship of the Road by visiting patreon.com/TolkienRoad. When you join the Fellowship of the Road, it helps us to keep on evering on and lands you some cool perks along the way. Learn more at patreon.com/TolkienRoad. YouTube, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know what's on your mind in the comments below. And hey, folks, if you like this episode, share it with everybody. All right, share it out there. It's been a while since we said just share it with people, but yeah, share the Easter joys, share the Tolkien joys, share the love of the Lord of the Rings. All these kinds of things, they're meant to be shared. They're meant to be shared because they're all wonderful things. All right, so in letter 89. Tolkien said, "The resurrection was the greatest eucatastrophe possible in the greatest fairy story, and produces that essential emotion, Christian joy, which produces tears, because it is qualitatively so like sorrow, because it comes from those places where joy and sorrow are at one, reconciled, as selfishness and altruism are lost in love." I mean, that's an amazing quote right there, and that forms the basis of what we're going to be talking about here, which is kind of connecting, the Easter joy, the resurrection joy, that Tolkien himself was a believer in, with that sense we get when we, at the end of Lord of the Rings, when the One Ring is destroyed, and the Fellowship wake up. Sam wakes up really in North Ithilien, in the Field of Cormallen, and Gandalf's alive, and he's alive, and Frodo's alive, and he sees all of his friends again, and they've escaped They've completed their mission and they've escaped, right? They've escaped death itself. So we're going to connect those things in this episode and talk about, why we feel like that's an appropriate connection. But also, it's kind of like this is going to be like a late Tolkien Reading Day episode, right? So Tolkien Reading Day normally happens on March 25th. I never have my act together enough to actually like do it, like land on March 25th. But this, just consider this our late contribution to Tolkien Reading Day 2023. And as I read this passage, Greta, I was just thinking to myself, like, man, this is a passage we should just. It's a long passage to read. I mean, not super long, but we're going to read this. 6 pages on my Kindle here. I don't think it's quite that many pages in the book, but we're going to read a good section, read a good chunk here. But I feel like this is one we could do every year at Easter because there's so much just beautiful stuff, wonderful, insightful. Like it's magical Tolkien writing, right? It's the thing that makes this the quality, all of the qualities that make Tolkien's Lord of the Rings the greatest book of all time, in my opinion. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, me too.
And in his pivotal Lord of the Rings critical essay on fairy stories, Tolkien makes an astonishing claim. The birth of Christ is the eucatastrophe of man's history, and the resurrection is the eucatastrophe of the story of the incarnation. Tolkien is asserting here a profound truth, that the resurrection of Christ is both historically true and reveals that all of us, in fact, live inside the greatest fairy tale of all. Something we've talked about quite a bit on this show, but we always come back to it because it's kind of like the most this deep thing that really I feel like motivates Tolkien. This is it's no easy thing to get one's mind around, and I'm sure many would and have scoffed at Tolkien's contention, right? But over the last 8 years I've spent doing this podcast, I'm convinced that it's a clear glimpse into the motivating force behind all of Tolkien's literary endeavors. Put simply, Tolkien was an apostle of Christian hope for the modern age. While there are numerous writings and passages that bear witness to this, and indeed many ways in which it is true, today I want to consider one of my favorite moments in The Lord of the Rings, Sam's awakening in Ithilien after the destruction of the One Ring. So let's dive in. All right. So Greta, I think I think we'll just do this where I'll just read a good chunk, and then I'll let you read a good chunk, and then I'll read a good chunk, and then you read a good chunk. All right.
Sounds good.
All right.
Yeah.
When Sam awoke, he found that he was lying on some soft bed, but over him gently swayed wide beechen boughs, and through their young leaves sunlight glimmered, green and gold. All the air was full of a sweet mingled scent. He remembered that smell, the fragrance of Ithilien. Bless me, he mused, how long have I been asleep? For the scent had borne him back to the day when he had lit his little fire under the sunny bank, and for the moment all else between was out of waking memory. He stretched and drew a deep breath. Why, what a dream I've had, he muttered. I'm glad to awake. He sat up, and then he saw that Frodo was lying beside him, and slept peacefully, one hand behind his head, and the other resting upon the coverlet. It was the right hand, and the third finger was missing. Full memory flooded back, and Sam cried aloud, It wasn't a dream! Then where are we? And a voice spoke softly behind him. In the land of Ithilien, and in the keeping of the king, and he awaits you. With that, Gandalf stood before him, robed in white, his beard now gleaming like pure snow in the twinkling of the leafy sunlight. Well, Master Samwise, how do you feel? He said. But Sam lay back and stared with open mouth, and for a moment, between bewilderment and great joy, he could not answer. At last he gasped. Gandalf, I thought you were dead, but then I thought I was dead myself. Is everything sad going to come untrue? What's happened to the world? A great shadow has departed, said Gandalf, and then he laughed, and the sound was like music, or like water in a parched land, and as he listened the thought came to Sam that he had not heard laughter, the pure sound of merriment, for days upon days without count. It fell upon his ears like the echo of all the joys he had ever known. But he himself burst into tears. Then, as a sweet rain will pass down a wind of spring and the sun will shine out the clearer, his tears ceased and his laughter welled up, and laughing he sprang from his bed. Go ahead.
How do I feel? He cried. Well, I don't know how to say it. I feel... He waved his arms in the air. I feel like spring after winter and sun on the leaves, and like trumpets and harps and all the songs I have ever heard. He stopped and he turned towards his master. But how's Mr. Frodo? He said. Isn't it a shame about his poor hand? I hope he's all right otherwise. He's had a cruel time. Yes, I am all right otherwise, said Frodo, sitting up and laughing in his turn. I fell asleep again waiting for you, Sam, you sleepy-head. I was awake early this morning, and now it must be nearly noon. Noon, said Sam, trying to calculate. Noon of what day? The 14th of the new year, said Gandalf, or, if you like, the 8th day of April in the Shire reckoning. But in Gondor, the new year will always now begin upon the 25th of March, when Sauron fell, and when you were brought out of the fire to the king. He has tended you, and now he awaits you. You shall eat and drink with him. When you are ready, I will lead you to him. The king? Said Sam. What king, and who is he? The king of Gondor and lord of the western lands, said Gandalf, and he has taken back all his ancient realm. He will ride soon to his crowning, but he waits for you. What shall we wear? Said Sam, for all he could see was the old and tattered clothes that they had journeyed in, lying folded on the ground beside their beds. The clothes that you wore on your way to Mordor, said Gandalf. Even the orc rags that you bore in the Black Land, Frodo, shall be preserved. No silks and linens, nor any armor or heraldry could be more honorable. But later I will find some other clothes, perhaps. Then he held out his hands to them, and they saw that one shone with light. What have you got there? Frodo cried. Can it be? Yes, I have brought you 2 treasures. They were found on Sam when you were rescued. The Lady Galadriel's gifts. Your glass, Frodo, and your box, Sam. You will be glad to have these safe again.
When they were washed and clad and had eaten a light meal, the hobbits followed Gandalf. They stepped out of the beech grove in which they had lain and passed on to a long green lawn, glowing in sunshine, bordered by stately dark-leaved trees laden with scarlet blossom. Behind them they could hear the sound of falling water, and a stream ran down before them between flowering banks until it came to a greenwood at the lawn's foot, and passed then on under an archway of trees through which they saw the shimmer of water far away. As they came to the opening in the wood, they were surprised to see knights in bright mail and tall guards in silver and black standing there, who greeted them with honor and bowed before them. And then one blew a long trumpet, and they went on through the aisle of trees beside the singing stream. So they came to a wide green land, and beyond it was a broad river in a silver haze, out of which rose a long wooded isle, and many ships lay by its shores. But on the field where they now stood a great host was drawn up, in ranks and companies glittering in the sun. And as the hobbits approached, swords were unsheathed, and spears were shaken, and horns and trumpets sang, and men cried with many voices and in many tongues, Long live the halflings! Praise them with great praise! Quio I ferien anan, Aglarni ferienath. Praise them with great praise, Frodo and Samwise. Duar a Berhael, Conin in Anun, Eglario, praise them, Eglario, a latate, laitate, andave, laitu valmet, praise them, Cormacolindor, a laita tariina, praise them, the ring-bearers, praise them with great praise. And so the red blood blushing in their faces and their eyes shining with wonder, Frodo and Sam went forward and saw that amidst the clamor, hosts were set 3 high seats built of green turves. Behind the seat upon the right floated white on green a great horse running free. Upon the left was a banner silver upon blue, a ship swan-prowed faring on the sea. But behind the highest throne in the midst of all, a great standard was spread in the breeze, and there a white tree flowered upon a sable field beneath a shining crown and 7 glittering stars. On the throne sat a mail-clad man. A great sword was laid across his knees, but he wore no helm. As they drew near, he rose, and then they knew him, changed as he was, so high and glad of face, kingly, lord of men, dark-haired with eyes of gray.
Frodo ran to meet him, and Sam followed close behind. Well, if it isn't the crown of all, he said. Strider, or I'm still asleep. Yes, Sam, Strider, said Aragorn. It is a long way. It is it not, from Bree, where you did not like the look of me? A long way for us all, but yours has been the darkest road. And then to Sam's surprise and utter confusion, he bowed his knee before them, and taking them by the hand, Frodo upon his right and Sam upon his left, he led them to the throne, and setting them upon it, he turned to the men and captains who stood by and spoke, so that his voice rang over all the host, crying, Praise them with great praise! When the glad shout had swelled up and died away, again, to Sam's final and complete satisfaction and pure joy, a minstrel of Gondor stood forth and knelt and begged leave to sing. And behold, he said, Lo, lords and knights and men of valor unashamed, kings and princes and fair people of Gondor, and riders of Rohan, and ye sons of Elrond, and Dunedain of the north, and elf and dwarf, and great hearts of the Shire, and all free folk of the west, now listen to my lay, for I will sing to you of Frodo of the 9 fingers and the Ring of Doom. And when Sam heard that, he laughed aloud for sheer delight, and he stood up and cried, Oh, great glory and splendor, and all my wishes have come true. And then he wept. And all the host laughed and wept, and in the midst of their merriment and tears, the clear voice of the minstrel rose like silver and gold, and all men were hushed. And he sang to them, now in the elven tongue, now in the speech of the west, until their hearts, wounded with sweet words, overflowed, and their joy was like swords, and they passed in thought out to regions where pain and delight flow together, and tears are the very wine of blessedness.
Right on. All right. So, just a beautiful, amazing passage. And I think there's a break there. There's actually 2 different passages that we read, but a break in terms of the passages, but I think they go together, right? I think they complete this image of this awakening, astonished joy, right? Of Sam, really we see through Sam's eyes, right? We experience through Sam's eyes more than any other. It strikes me, we actually went and saw watched Return of the King in the theater last night, the extended edition, and I had just read/listened to this earlier this week, and then I realized in the movie it's seen through Frodo's eyes, right? It's kind of done through Frodo's eyes, but in the book it's done through Sam's eyes. So that's an interesting little difference there. I want to highlight a couple of things at the very end before we go back and talk about some of the other aspects of this passage. First of all, I don't know that I've always so clearly picked up on this, but the reason Sam has this just overwhelming moment of joy right here at the end is there's a very specific reason for that. And if you go back to right before this passage where so it's like the cataclysm of Mount Doom, the One Ring has just been destroyed, and Frodo and Sam think they're pretty much done at this point, like they're just they're gonna die here, right? Their mission accomplished, but we're gonna die here. And Sam says to Frodo, it says, they stood now, and Sam, still holding his master's hand, caressed it. He sighed. What a tale we have been in, Mr. Frodo, haven't we? He said. I wish I could hear it told. Do you think they'll say, now comes the story of 9-fingered Frodo and the Ring of Doom? And then everyone will hush like we did when in Rivendell they told us the tale of Baron One Hand and the Great Jewel. I wish I could hear it, and I wonder how it will go on after our part. And that's exactly what they sing, right? I will sing to you of Frodo of the 9 Fingers and the Ring of Doom, right? So Sam is literally having his last wish, and before really he thought death, fulfilled right here, right? Oh great glory and splendor, and all my wishes have come true.
Very overwhelming, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, and then I just love this description of this scene of overwhelming joy here, right? Until their hearts, wounded with sweet words, overflowed, and their joy was like swords, and they passed in thought out to regions where pain and delight flow together, and tears are the very wine of blessedness, right? That relates to me to that passage I read from one of Tolkien's letters at the beginning of this episode, right? Christian joy which produces tears because it is qualitatively so like sorrow, because it comes from those places where joy and sorrow are at one, reconciled, as selfishness and altruism are lost in love. It's like, how can joy and sorrow be reconciled, right? How can those 2 things go together? But that is a peculiar something that Tolkien, Lewis, many others have highlighted, is this notion of even in the Passion of Christ, right? You have this utter sorrow of the crucifixion and everything, all the betrayals and everything that goes along with that, the pains, the agonies that go along with that. But then you have the joy of the resurrection, and somehow they're all one event that we look to as Christians. They go together, right? And and that sensation of overwhelming joy. If you felt it, that there is something in it like sorrow. Like you feel like it's almost indescribable, the sensation, but you feel something like sorrow, but it turns into but it like turns into happiness. And so this idea of like the tears are the very wine of blessedness, right? Where pain and delight flow together, and tears are the very wine of blessedness. First of all, it's just unfathomably beautiful poetry, and it just describes this feeling that is otherwise it's otherwise indescribable, right? How do you describe tears of joy? Like, why will we cry when something is so joyful, makes us so happy that we describe it as joy, right? Why would we cry? And I think Tolkien might say because it's a foretaste of being able to look back upon all of the sorrows one has endured, and to know that everything sad will come untrue, right? And that everything sad has come untrue, right? Like we know the joy, it's a foretaste of that time in the beyond when we'll look back on everything that we've endured in this life, and together with one another we'll know that it's all behind us, and somehow it was necessary to bring us to an even greater joy, right? And we're never able to do that, to say that, like, to really appreciate that when we're going through the sorrow, right? But we do know at the same time of, like, even in this life there's times we may have gone through something, but we can look back and somehow it explains a certain level of joy, or we look back and say, even without, if I hadn't gone through that sorrow, I might be different now, right? Things might be different, right? And they might not be as good, right?
You might even be able to make the argument that can you even have joy without sorrow? Like, it's really like the sorrow intensifies the joy, right? Without the sorrow, you don't even know what joy is. So I can see where, like, it seems contraindicated, but it's not. Like, one completes the other in a way.
Yeah, it's this musical notion that defies words, that defies description. It's a paradox. Like, we can't explain it rationally, or it just but it's not irrational. It goes beyond it goes beyond rationality, right? It's an overwhelming of emotion, of fulfillment, of things being put right, of everything sad coming. Like, how can everything sad come untrue, right? How can something that's happened come untrue? But somehow Tolkien found the words to describe it through Sam, right? I mean, like, that's a genius of that particular part, right? Is that, Sam is just astonished, and so what's beautiful about it is he puts it in Sam's voice. He puts the emotion in Sam's voice in a way that, like, it's kind of no, like, philosopher would say it that way, right? But Sam, the gardener's son, right? That's the only way he can, this utterly nonsensical way, but it's somehow it's the perfect way to put it, right?
I'm finding it, the whole description of their joy was like swords. That in and of itself just seems like such a paradox, right? Because you think of a sword as, it's a weapon, right? It's a bringer of sorrow ultimately, and you think of all the, especially having just watched the extended edition again last night, just seeing all the swords and all the battles that they were used in. I mean, a sword doesn't bring good things typically, right? But then you can kind of think about that as, like, a surgeon's knife, like, is a type of sword, and that can bring good. So anyway, it's just interesting to me that was his choice of words. But then you think about being pierced through the heart. I don't know. It's just kind of, it's really beautiful.
Well, as Catholics, it probably reminds us of Mary's, her heart being pierced, right? Like, that it talks about her her heart being, a sword shall pierce your heart also, right? That there's this strange mystical relation between between like the pain, between pain and uh, and overwhelming joy and fulfillment, right? But it's like none of it makes sense apart from Christ, right? Apart from the
Right.
passion of Christ, right?
Right.
That somehow this journey of sorrows leads to the journey of joy and glory, right? Leads to the realization of joy and glory. It reminds me, the thing you highlighted with the swords reminds me of, and I don't have the exact quote, but what C.S. Lewis said about how like his famous quote about Lord of the Rings, right? In fact, gosh, do I have it? Well, let me look at my new bookshelf, everybody, with all my Tolkien books on it. Let's see here. Can I find it? Actually, I don't think I have it readily available, unfortunately. Let's see if it's on the back of this one.
Well.
Oh, here we go.
Oh,
Here are beauties which pierce like swords or burn like cold iron. Here are beauties which pierce like swords or burn like cold iron. That's what C.S. Lewis said about Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
okay.
Lord of the Rings. So, again, I think this is an idea that Tolkien and Lewis very much like held between the two of them, influenced each other on. This idea of joy and sorrow somehow having, sharing something in common, or being part of the same process of blessedness, right? Yeah, just a couple of other things to note. And even as I was reading, there's little things that stood out to me. First of all, Stam's astonished. It's he has astonishment at seeing Gandalf alive because he thought he was dead. Of course, he's astonished at seeing Strider, who he thought was just Strider, and who he always viewed with a little bit of suspicion. He's the king, right? Whoa, crazy. Yeah, mind blown. But he also sees Frodo missing his finger, and when I look at that, it reminds me of like the wounds of Christ, which he still bears even in his resurrection appearances, and it made me kind of think of Thomas, of doubting Thomas, right? And when he sees Jesus, and he said, "Unless I see his wounds, I won't believe it's him." And so he sees his wounds. So when Christ appears to him, he sees his wounds. They're still there, right? Even though he's beyond them, he's passed beyond them, right? They're still there. That reminded me of Sam seeing Frodo here without missing his finger and realizing, wait a minute, it does all seem like a dream at this point, but yet still Frodo's missing his finger, right? Frodo still bears the wound, right? This one particular wound, right?
But without that wound, there would have not been, they wouldn't have completed their mission. And
yeah.
So even that serves as kind of a reminder of why they're experiencing the joy that they're experiencing.
And even that, as we go beyond this section of the book in Lord of the Rings, Frodo, one of the most fascinating aspects of like the long ending of Lord of the Rings is that Frodo is never quite the same, right? He is never, and is it's eloquently put succinctly in the movie. At the end, it's like, we set out to save the Shire, and we did save it, but not for me, right? That the Shire was not saved for anybody else, right? I'm sorry, the Shire wasn't saved. The Shire was saved, but Frodo was so wounded in the process that that the sacrifice remained, right? But that doesn't mean that blessedness doesn't await him, right? It's just that he had to truly sacrifice his happiness, his Shire level happiness, for the sake of the Shire, right? For the sake of the Shire. And again, just great beauty and truth in that.
Yeah.
And I just love this. They passed in thought out to regions. What does it say? We kind of read part of this, but they passed in thought out to regions where pain and delight flow together. I just like the notion of like in thought they passed out to these other places, right? Like that their minds were lifted away even from this beautiful place where they are now, right? Into into something else. And isn't that what like great art does for us? Is it allows our minds to pass out, even if we're in a okay place when we're listening to it. The great art draws us even out to some other place, right? To some mystical place. Lord of the Rings does that. Great music does that. Great films, great films do that. It's just the nature of great art, right? It takes us to other places that. Do they exist? I don't know. When we experience this art, are we experiencing something that's a foretaste of a greater reality, right? Personally, I think we are, right? And I think that's something that Tolkien was getting at.
For sure.
Greta, anything else you want to highlight from having read this passage?
I feel like there was. What was it? Well, it's just also the, just the beauty of the hobbits being celebrated, like being like the king himself, right? Bowing down, like kneeling down before them. And just that whole, that whole thought of often it's the little guy, right? It's the one who goes overlooked and not unappreciated, and that that really do what's, that really kind of make it happen. And I just I love the celebration of the hobbits at the end of this. I just think it's truly beautiful. Yeah
Wonderful.
No, it's just it's just a lovely passage. There's a lot here for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, friends, I believe that Sam words, is everything sad going to come untrue, are Tolkien's challenge to all of his readers. Will you believe in hope beyond hope, in the fool's hope, as Gandalf said once upon a time? Can you believe that evil and death have been conquered and will one day be no more? Because he believed in the resurrection of Christ, Tolkien infused the Lord of the Rings with these very ideas. With this in mind, we bid you happy reading and most of all, a happy Easter. Christ is risen. All right. Shout out. Want to thank everybody. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you to our amazing patrons, especially the following: J.R.R,
Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien,
Jacob Lockham,
John H,
Melkor27,
Emilio P,
Jonathan D,
Mike M,
Robert H,
Paul D,
Julia,
Wordy,
Joe Bagelman,
Richard K,
Matt R,
Matthew W,
Garrett P,
Chris K,
John W,
Eugene D,
Chris B,
Daniel S,
Seb M,
Shayna,
Corey C,
Ms. Anonymous,
Andrew T,
Red Hawk,
Shannon S,
Brian O,
Zeke F,
James L,
Chris L,
Azia V,
Ish of the Hammer,
Teresa C,
David of Pints with Jack,
and Eric B.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching and or listening. We will talk at you next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.